Hey everyone, welcome back. SHOT Show always looks exciting on the surface. Bright lights, packed booths, and a lot of products that feel groundbreaking in the moment. But once the show is over and the noise dies down, that's usually when the real question shows up. What actually mattered? That's what this video is about. I wanted to take a step back after SHOT Show 2026, let the hype cool off a bit, and look at the guns that still felt worth talking about days later. Not everything here is flashy. Not everything is new, and not everything is for everyone. But every gun on this list stood out for a reason. Whether it was design choices, real-world practicality, or simply because it pointed in an interesting direction for where the industry is heading. Some of these picks reflect personal impressions from hands-on time. Others made the list because they generated a lot of discussion and curiosity among shooters. The goal isn't to crown a perfect gun. It's to sort out what actually deserves attention once the booth lights turn off. One of the more unexpected guns that kept popping into my head after SHOT Show was the Maverick 88 semi-auto. It's not flashy, it's not tactical eye candy, and it definitely wasn't surrounded by hype influencers, but it stood out anyway. On paper, it's a straightforward gas-operated semi-automatic shotgun, offered in both 12-gauge and 20-gauge, with a price point hovering around the $600 mark. That alone puts it in a very interesting position. Reliable semi-autos at that price are rare, and when they do exist, expectations need to be realistic. What makes this one tricky is reputation. The Maverick 88 name carries weight because of the pump guns. Simple, tough, and hard to kill. Translating that legacy into a semi-auto is not automatic, especially with overseas production involved. That doesn't make it bad, but it does change how cautiously it should be approached. This is the kind of gun that makes sense for people who want an affordable semi-auto for range use, training, or light field work, but only after real-world reliability is proven. It's interesting, but it's also a wait-and-see kind of interesting. The Apollo 11 2011 earns its spot here not because it's perfect, but because it challenges what people expect from a 2011-style pistol at this price level. At its core, this is a double-stack, single-action 2011 with a 5-inch barrel. Offered in both standard and ported configurations, the base model sits around the $1,000 mark, which already puts it in rare territory for a U.S. made 2011. Once you start adding porting and upgraded grips, the price climbs quickly. But that's true for every 2011 on the market. What stood out wasn't one single feature. It was the overall direction, improved trigger feel, better controls, and a cleaner overall fit compared to earlier versions. Show a company that's actively refining the platform, instead of just re-releasing the same gun. The real question isn't whether it's cheap. It isn't. The question is whether it delivers enough performance and reliability to justify stepping into the 2011 world without paying premium brand prices. That's what makes it worth paying attention to in 2026. This is one of those guns that doesn't need a practical excuse to exist. A semi-automatic 50 BMG rifle is never going to be a daily use tool for most people. It's large, expensive to feed, and completely unnecessary by any rational standard. And yet, it keeps drawing attention for one simple reason: access. With a projected price under $5,000, this rifle opens the door to a category that has traditionally been locked behind much higher price tags. Semi-auto 50s are rare, and when they do show up, they're often well outside the reach of most shooters. From a technical standpoint, it's exactly what you'd expect. Big, heavy, and built around managing extreme recoil and pressure. From a market standpoint, it fills a gap that didn't really exist before at this price point. Some people will buy it to shoot occasionally. Others will buy it because it's impressive, ridiculous, and unapologetically over the top. Either way, it's hard to ignore, and that alone earns it a place on this list. There's no practical way to talk about the MR762A4 without acknowledging that this is not a smart rifle in the traditional sense. It's heavy, it's expensive, and it asks a lot from the person buying it. And yet, it keeps earning a place in conversations like this. Technically, it's a 7.62x51 NATO rifle using a short-stroke gas piston system, built around a rigid monolithic rail. Everything about it feels overbuilt, from the receiver to the bolt carrier group. That weight penalty isn't accidental. It's part of why the gun shoots as smoothly as it does for a 308 platform. This isn't a rifle for running drills all day or building out on a budget. It's for shooters who prioritize durability, consistency, and mechanical refinement over convenience. The MR762 doesn't try to be modern in the lightweight, minimalist sense. It leans fully into being solid, stable, and unapologetically robust. In 2026, that kind of design philosophy feels almost old-fashioned, but that's also why it stands out. It knows exactly what it is, and it doesn't try to apologize for it. The Steyr platform has always lived in a strange space, loved by some, dismissed by others, and often criticized for refusing to evolve fast enough. That's why the latest updates matter more than they might seem at first glance. The most noticeable change is the move to a monolithic M-lock rail, finally bringing the factory configuration closer to what aftermarket companies have been doing for years. Internally, the addition of a hydraulic buffer changes how the gun manages recoil impulse, especially on the heavier calibers. It's still very much a Steyr, but a smoother one. From a technical standpoint, the platform remains a piston-driven system with a focus on reliability and consistent operation under harsh conditions. What's changed is usability, updated controls, better ergonomics, and improved compatibility. Reduce friction for modern shooters. This doesn't suddenly turn the Steyr into a budget rifle or a lightweight competition gun. What it does is make it easier to justify in today's market. It finally feels like a factory rifle that acknowledges how people actually configure and use their guns in 2026. This is a perfect example of how a single design decision can completely change the conversation around a pistol. The Canik Prime already had a solid foundation, a striker-fired, polymer frame handgun with a 4-inch barrel, an excellent trigger, and strong value for the money. Where opinions were split was recoil management and how the original setup handled under faster shooting. The addition of the Radian Ramjet changes that equation. Instead of feeling like an accessory added for marketing, the compensator integrates cleanly into the system and does exactly what it's supposed to do: reduce muzzle rise without compromising reliability or balance. The result is a pistol that stays flatter and feels more controlled during rapid strings. From a technical perspective, nothing else drastic had to change. That's what makes this version interesting. It's not a reinvention, it's refinement. When price, performance, and shootability line up this well, it's easy to see why this model generated so much attention. This is the kind of upgrade that moves a gun from interesting to genuinely competitive. What stood out here wasn't just a single product, but the direction Smith & Wesson is clearly leaning into. Instead of chasing trends, the focus feels more deliberate, building solid platforms and let the details do the talking. On the semi-auto side, the M&P metal brings a steel frame into a lineup that's traditionally polymer heavy. That added mass isn't just about feel. It noticeably helps with recoil control and stability, especially when paired with competition-oriented features. Inline porting and optics-ready configurations make it clear who this pistol is aimed at. Then there's the 686 Plus, which feels like a reminder that revolvers aren't dead. They're just niche. A 7-shot .357 Magnum with a 4-inch barrel isn't practical for everyone, but it offers a blend of shootability and mechanical simplicity that modern pistols can't replicate. The added capacity over traditional 6 shooters is a small change that makes a real difference. Together, these two guns show a brand that's comfortable serving very different audiences without diluting either product. That balance is harder to pull off than it looks. Steyr doesn't make noise for the sake of attention, and that's exactly why these pistols were easy to overlook at first. But once you spend time with them, the design philosophy becomes obvious. The ATC is a steel-framed competition pistol, built to be flat-shooting and controllable. Weight is used intentionally, not avoided. The ATDC takes a different route. Polymer frame, striker-fired, with an integrated compensator, aimed at shooters who want performance without committing to a full competition setup. What really ties these together is ergonomics. The grip angle, texture, and overall balance feel purposeful rather than experimental. Nothing screams "look at me," but everything works together in a way that feels refined. From a technical standpoint, these pistols aren't revolutionary. From a practical standpoint, they're coherent. Every design choice supports how the gun is meant to be shot. In a market full of half measures and feature overload, that clarity is refreshing, and it puts Steyr back on the radar in a serious way. This entry completely reframed how I look at the P365 platform. On its own, the P365 is compact, efficient, and easy to carry, but it doesn't immediately inspire confidence beyond close distances. The Flux chassis changes that by giving the system more points of contact, better balance, and a level of control that feels closer to a micro PDW than a concealed carry pistol. Technically, It's a modular chassis built around SIG's fire control unit, which means the core operating system stays the same while the handling characteristics shift dramatically. The added stability makes the gun easier to manage under speed, and the improvement in practical accuracy is immediately noticeable. What makes this interesting isn't novelty, it's versatility. The chassis doesn't replace the original concept of the P365. It expands it. One platform, multiple roles, without forcing the user into an entirely new ecosystem. That kind of modular thinking feels genuinely forward-looking, and it's why this setup landed so high on the list. This spot goes to Rost Martin not because of hype, but because of volume. Specifically, how often this gun comes up when people talk about affordable, modern striker-fired pistols that actually ship and actually get used. Both the RM1S and the compensated RM1C are 9.19mm striker-fired pistols, built around a compact, Glock 19-sized footprint. Barrel length sits in the 4-inch range. Magazines hold 15 rounds. And the slide is optics, ready from the factory. These are not exotic specs, but they are deliberate ones. Nothing here is oversized, underbuilt, or chasing a niche role. What matters more is execution. The guns are assembled in Texas, and the design traces back to the RX Delta lineage, which explains the familiar internal layout and parts compatibility. That matters because it reduces unknowns. The locking system, striker design, and recoil assembly are all well understood solutions, rather than experimental ones. Feedback around reliability has been consistent. The guns run. The most common criticism isn't stoppages. It's trigger weight, out of the box. The trigger tends to be heavier than many competitors, which is measurable, not subjective. Some shooters address that with minor refinement or aftermarket options. Others leave it alone for duty or carry use. At its price point, the RM1C and RM1S aren't trying to beat premium pistols. They're competing with guns people actually buy, carry, and put real round counts through. That practicality, more than novelty, is why this platform ends up at the top of the list. Underscore, 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 underscore. What became clear while putting this list together is how much the conversation has shifted. Fewer products are trying to shock people, and more are focused on working within real constraints. Cost, recoil, durability, parts availability. That may not generate instant hype, but it does create gear that survives beyond the launch window. Not every gun mentioned here will end up being a long-term success. Some will stall, some will evolve, and a few will quietly fade out once real usage exposes their limits. That process isn't a failure of the industry. It's how weak ideas get filtered out. If this list does anything useful, it's narrowing the field. It cuts down the number of things worth tracking and leaves you with a shorter group of platforms that justify more attention. Everything else will make its case, or lose it, over time. The only way that actually matters